Hello, Ken. My name is Tracy Reed, and I have read your message here, and I thought that a simple text reply back probably wouldn't do my reply justice, nor your comment. So I am going to answer your question in this video. So let's take a look here. Your question is, what kind of hands-on experience do you have with ChatGPT and other AI engines? If you don't have hands-on experience, then you are talking out of ignorance. That is irresponsible speech. I agree, that would be talking out of ignorance, and it would be irresponsible speech if I did not have many years of experience working with AI engines. As it happens, I do. Let's take a look here. For any of you out there interested in connecting with me professionally, you can find me here on LinkedIn. Nowadays, I work mostly in cybersecurity, particularly in areas with AI applications or trying to find ways to apply the current AI technologies to cybersecurity. I first started playing with AI back in the late 1980s when I was in junior high school, and I got my hands on a copy of this book, More Basic Computer Games. And the cover, there's a couple different versions of this book. I'm pretty sure I had the one with the other cover. It depends on what market you were in. Anyway, this book contained the basic source code for a program called ELIZA. It was known as Doctor previously. And, in the late 60s through the 70s, this was considered super high-tech artificial intelligence. It would not be considered artificial intelligence by modern standards, but back then it certainly was. I actually typed in the source code from the book, and this is a different version of the source code. I don't know that this would be the exact one that was in that book, but I'm sure it's equivalent. And it worked. I typed it in, it worked. I actually increased its vocabulary a bit. I taught it a little more grammar. I gave it some more of these like stock phrases. But anybody who's played with ELIZA knows that it's very limited, and it quickly becomes apparent that you're talking to a program. Then the AI winter came along, and that was basically the end of AI research or progress for quite some time. The government was no longer investing in AI, the Defense Department, the universities. It almost got a bad reputation. Google AI winter, and you will find a lot of the history. Companies like Lisp machines and Symbolics basically went away at the end of the AI winter, which was a real shame because they had some neat stuff. Unfortunately, the stuff they had would not have gotten us where we are today with our current AI, even if they hadn't gone away. So, at one point more recently, I'd say about 10 years ago, before ChatGPT and the modern transformer models and large language models and all that stuff took off, I was investigating interactive activation and competition networks. These are really cool for, let's see, there's a bunch of stuff on it. These are really cool for identifying connections or correlations in very large, complicated networks. I am also playing around with Cloudflare's AutoRag. That's retrieval augmented generation, as it says right here, which is a cool way of giving it extra information. Like instead of the typical 8K context window that ChatGPT has, where you tell it some things and ask it some questions and then it gives you results, you can actually upload a whole bunch of, let's say, documents. Maybe I've seen people use this for like manuals. You can upload all the manuals for your car or your computer system or anything, and then ask it questions. And then based on what it has learned from those manuals, it can answer your questions. There are multiple ways of training a large language model. There's the very computational intensive way of training it, like actually building the model. And that requires, a bunch of GPUs, and it's really quite expensive. That's one extreme. The other extreme is what you've probably done in ChatGPT, where you use the context window. You tell it some things and ask it some questions, and it all fits on your screen or whatever. And that's your session. There's like a middle ground, and that is retrieval augmented generation. And that is where you can give it all this information, not encoded in the neural network, not encoded in the LLM, but in a vector database that it can look things up in and use to augment the conversation with you. That's why it's called retrieval augmented generation. It's retrieving information which you have provided and using it to augment its knowledge. I'm currently running that on Cloudflare because I've been experimenting with it locally also. I just haven't found a good local setup that I really like, although I expect to get to that soon because there are some significant limitations running your RAG in Cloudflare, or there's really not many other services that will let you build a RAG. There's a couple. I think Cloudflare is the best, but doing it locally is what's ultimately going to be best for me. And of course, I have been playing around with ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and DeepSeek and all of these other recent innovations, to the point where I even have all of these things running locally here on my own machine. I don't have to go to the ChatGPT website or anything like that in order to use ChatGPT or any of the other models and ask them questions or whatever. For example, I have right here running on my local machine, Ollama, with a bunch of different models that I have downloaded recently, some a while back, some in the last few days. I play with the different models, see what they're good at. I've recently upgraded my machine. Oops, there we go. So I've got 125, basically 128 gig, minus a little bit for the operating system here on my local machine. And I'm running the Llama 3.370 billion parameter model at the moment. And I have trained it with various information. I can ask it questions. So I can ask it about you, for example. And it will think for a moment. So we can see that it has learned a few things and can produce a reasonable summary of what it has learned from your Facebook profile, which is cool. But the thing that bothers me about asking something like ChatGPT about things like this, philosophical nature of the universe kind of questions, is that it's a mathematical algorithm, basically. It's like a Markov model. It's like a very, very fancy Markov model. If you've ever looked at a Markov model, this is math, this is numbers. I suppose if you smoke enough weed, you might figure, wow, man, the universe comes out of the numbers or something like that, which I guess from a physics sense, it's kind of all math until it isn't. And we get into things that math can't explain, or things that we don't know, or dividing by zero, or the sort of things that Sabine Hossenfelder has been complaining about lately. Mathematical fictions, things where the math says, things the math says could exist, but in our reality simply don't. And I'm certainly not qualified to get too deep into questions of, do inanimate objects, or does chat GPT have a Buddha nature or something like that, right? We're going to start asking questions like that, then all I can say is Mew.